rethink the scientific conference. If online meetings become the norm, conferences will be more affordable, international, and inclusive if virtual events become the new normal. Physical meetings can be replicated virtually to some degree, and this has many benefits, including making access easier for people who have limited budgets, family commitments, or disabilities. Some people are also quick to point out that moving meetings online can save attendees time and reduce their carbon emissions, in turn reduce global warming. So going online can make all meetings truly international meetings. So I have actually started learning to love virtual conferences in the coronavirus era. So today's session will have one lecture, two case presentations, one panel discussion, and also including an interesting quiz session. I shall share the quiz rules now. There shall be 5 questions, each having a single right choice. 30 seconds shall be given to answer each question. Whosoever gives all right answers and the fastest answer for question 3 to 5 shall be the winner of the quiz. In case of a tie, winner shall be decided based on least time taken to answer question 2. And in case there's a tie in that also, then question 1. Quiz questions shall be seen as a clickable link during your Zoom meeting. Atom India shall not be liable in case the quiz is interrupted due to any technical glitch in the software, power failure, internet connection disruption, or any other unforeseen circumstances. In case multiple members are sharing a single screen, answer shall be submitted under the name of the registrant who has logged in. Others cannot claim the answer or prize. You are encouraged to use individual logins for each person. All members are requested to update their Zoom apps on their mobile phones, desktops, laptops, as the quiz can be played only on the latest version of Zoom app. In case of any dispute, decision of Honorable Secretary Atom India and Joint Secretary Scientific shall be final and binding. The winner shall be awarded the prize as per Atom policy. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Pathak, who doesn't need any introduction, actually. Secretary, Atom India. She is Principal Consultant and Head Transfusion Medicine. Dr. Sangeeta, kindly deliver the formal welcome address and what made in going to this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Nidhi. So, Dr. Navjyoti Chaudhary, the President, Atom International, Dr. Gajen Gupta, Chairperson, Atom India, Dr. Sadhana Mangwana, the Treasurer, Atom India, Dr. Sushila Inna, Joint Secretary, Atom India, Dr. Ankit Mathur, Scientific Secretary, Atom International, Dr. Makru, Dr. Poonam, and the other esteemed audiences from the transfusion medicine on this virtual platform from India and all over the Atom countries. A very good afternoon to all of you, a namaskar, and a very warm welcome to you all on the first of webinar of the series of webinars organized by Atom India. It's raining webinars all over, but this did not discourage us to bring you a series of webinars scheduled from July to December 2021 with very, very interesting title to it given by all of the members of this team that is involved in it, that is Tea Time Discussion with TM. The conceptualization of this series of webinars, it actually originated from the Atom International team, mainly Dr. Ankit and of course our esteemed President Dr. Navjyoti sir, which was then shaped and remodeled into the present form by Atom India Executive Body, which includes Dr. Gajen Gupta, myself, Dr. Sadhana, Dr. Sushila Inna, Dr. Nidhi Mehta, and later we decided to form a formal scientific committee and we included Dr. Ravi Dara as well in it. Our technical support comes from Dr. Ekaj Jindal. Then we would be there on every 4th Thursday of the month till December 2021. So please mark your calendars for the same, as the entire series has very interesting topics. Then any one of you can also mail us the topics of interest that you would like to hear from us on this platform. As Nidhi already has specified that we would be having a talk of 20 minutes and 2 interesting cases. And we have added a clause to these cases that they should have not been presented anywhere else prior to this platform. And as already said, to keep you up and alert throughout the webinar, we have some mind-tingling questions related to the talk and cases being presented, popped up here and there by a quizmaster. So be alert, as the first answer to all the questions correctly has a sizable reward to it. A panel discussion would add the required zing to the entire session. Atom India has pioneered in holding the first online quiz on the virtual platform in the country. We shall be holding the virtual quiz in full transparency, but however, as Nidhi has already shown, if there are some technical and software glitches, we would be sorry on that. We would make the required changes to the program as and when needed, suggested and advised by you. So best wishes to you, to all, for all and all success of the series. Wish to see you in large numbers in the forthcoming sessions. Wish to see you benefiting from this academic fiesta. Stay safe, get vaccinated, keep webinaring and enjoy the session. Thank you so much. I hand over the mic to Nidhi now. Nidhi, thank you.
Nidhi, you're mute.
Thank you, Dr. Pathak. So it's my pleasure to invite President Atom International, Dr. Navjyoti Chaudhary, and Dr. Gajendra Gupta, Chairperson Atom India, to chair the session. Dr. Chaudhary doesn't need any introduction. I think all attending the session know him very well. So I have not put any content in this. And same goes with Dr. Gajendra Gupta also. So over to you, Dr. Chaudhary sir and Dr. Gupta sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I will take only probably 3 to 4 minutes of your time before it starts. And congratulations to Atom India chapter. This is a very novel idea, and that credit goes to all team that it is monthly, as well as it has got a quiz session, and we need that, rather than just listening, we contribute also. Number 2, Atom India chapter is one of the most active chapters out of, we have got 19 country chapters in 19 countries. And on top of that, we have got seven associate member and from associate member countries, which are from Balkan countries as well as in Central Asia. Having said that, this particular program probably will make a pathfinder for other country chapters. Like it's a new idea having your quiz. So we'll pass on this idea after finishing this first session. So there are many things which going on new in Atom platform. One is, as Dr. Makru, one of our senior most faculty, he just told before this session that nowadays webinar becomes very popular due to many reasons. And Atom webinar, and we request you all to be vigilant. Every month there are 1 to 3 webinars every month in different platforms. Please take the advantage. If you're a member, everything is complimentary. We are doing everything for our members only. Number 2, I request everybody in this platform. Now I can see there are 115 participants. I request you all to join Atom working group. Atom Working Group is a very, very dynamic platform. We have got this WhatsApp group, and we have got in 4 WhatsApp group, that is immunohematology, cellular therapy, voluntary donation, as well as quality. And there's one restricted one that is on fractionation, but these other 4 are open for all. And this is very dynamic. Like somebody was talking yesterday from Bangladesh. They wanted to know about granular set collection as well as how to transfuse. And to the utter surprise, there are 4 people from the 4 corners of the world. They started replying, and they got the solution. And this is a good platform. So I request everybody. For that, you can, of course, approach secretary, treasurer, and chairperson of the Indian chapters will facilitate them. The last 2 things, just I want to inform you, there is a new development and unique development in Atom is the ABB quality certificate. This is actually, you can say this is a game changer for quality standard maintenance in the Asian countries, for homogenization of the standard in different countries. Because as you know, the standard is different in different countries. Even blood bank standards are different in same country in different cities. So we need homogenizations. This is a equalizer. So this is available. You just have to, and anybody has done quality certification, they will have this tag. And we encourage everybody. This Rotary Blood Bank in Bangalore, they have already done it. Another 4 blood banks, they are online and they are in different stages of obtaining. So I encourage everybody to get it. It is doable and affordable. Last but not the least, we are actually working for last 7 or 8 years, and we are going to get a result. That is one Atom academic certificate. This is on, and our last date of launch for this certificate is 15th of August. Though it is international, that anybody and everybody, any part of the world, they can appear in an exam and they get a certificate. It came to our mind because after doing MD transfusion medicine in India, we have a probability of getting, PDCC in some centers. After that, what? It's PDCC is available in India, not in other countries. Even they do not have MD transfusion medicine. Therefore, this is academic quality. This is academic certificate, and this will be being developed by Atom. Most probably, Barcelona Blood Center will be our partner. But we are trying to get it done by 15th of August 2021. And thank you, Atom India chapter, especially Dr. Nidhi, for nice introductions, as well as other colleagues, and enjoy your first session. And we will definitely going to propagate this one to other members in other countries. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Nidhi.
Dr. Gajendra, sir.
Good evening, everybody. And I really congratulate my team. And it's really good effort what they have put in. A nice idea, and it has come up well. And for the first time, means rather for many months since we are attending webinar, I'm seeing 126 participants. It's a good number. I think congratulations to everybody. I hope you fulfill the expectations of the participants and make it a wonderful experience for all of us. So our first speaker, Nidhi. Our first speaker is Dr. Shushila Jacobena. She is Professor and Head Department of Transfusion Medicine and Clinical Laboratory, Vice Principal of Jubilee Mission Medical College and Research Institute, Thrissur, Kerala. We all know her very well. All transfusion specialists know her very well. And why she has been selected for quality, I can give you an answer. Because she held me for 5 days in Thrissur for her staff to get trained in quality. Means the dedication which she has in quality is so enormous, and I felt it for 5 days. So now I invite you, ma'am, for your presentation, and best of luck for everything.
Nidhi, please request everyone to mute their phones.
Everyone can mute their mics, so that we don't hear any sound. Dr. Sushila, over to you.
Good evening. I hope I'm audible, Nidhi. Yeah.
You're audible.
Yep. Thank you very much, Dr. Gajendra, for the introduction. And as you already mentioned, now we are missing people coming over to conduct some programs here. Now as I'm the opening batsman, I'm really a little tensed about being the first speaker in this series. The topic is automation in immunohematology, the need of the hour. Before I go into my presentation, I would like to give a brief journey of my life in the blood bank. I started because that's how I moved from the basics to automation. So when I started working in the blood bank about 36 years ago, there was only tiles that were used for grouping. I'm very sure the youngsters in this group will not understand how a blood bank can function like that. We were using blood collection bottles, not bags. The tiles were used for grouping and cross-matching. There was no tube technique. And from that, slowly there was a movement from tiles to slide and then tube, and then we moved on to the other technologies of immunohematology. So as I am a person who has seen everything, I know what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages of the different techniques that are used. An overview of what I'll be speaking in my session is why automation? Why do we need automation? What are the technologies that are being used? And what is the advantages, or what are the advantages and disadvantages of each technology? And who are the major players in automation in the immunohematology lab? Now, when we talk of automation in a lab, automation actually is a process or is a philosophy of continuous improvement which applies to every facet of healthcare delivery. And now laboratory and transfusion medicine both have seen giant strides, especially the lab, because I've worked in the lab as well as in the blood bank. I know how we started automation in the lab long before we started in the blood bank. So from moving from the lab and the blood bank, this advancement in technology, like going in for automation, has made an advancement to deliver quality care to patients. Now, the lab, by doing automation in labs, we have increased the turnaround time. We have accelerated the throughputs. But so as I told you earlier, the lab started automation first, and then we moved to the blood bank, because blood bank always thought safety is of importance. I remember when we wanted to move from the tube technique, from the slide to the tube, there was resistance from the technician side. And especially when we wanted to move from tube, when we wanted to move for the column agglutination, what our technician said was, ma'am, we are not seeing anything. So how can we move from the tube to the tile? We don't know whether it's right or wrong. So this sort of inhibition from technicians was always there. Now, the factors. ഈ sound ഒന്ന് മാറ്റുമോ? ഇതൊന്ന് മാറ്റുമോ? ഈ മുകളിലത്തെ. The factors necessitating why should we go for automation? The turnaround time, the most of the time what happens in any test or any laboratory, what happens is everybody wants the result very fast. They want to take results home very fast. The other demand was staff shortages, because there's a lot of attrition nowadays in laboratory or in hospital staffs. Then maintenance, there is less maintenance, and most of the labs and blood banks are now working 24/7. So you need that much of staff to work 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. So you need more staff. So you need to find out methods by which you can substitute manpower by machinery. And also the throughput of samples. The number of samples that we get are much more than we used to get in olden days. And so another thing is we need some process by which we can do a number of analytes or a number of tests, and different methods we can use on the same system. Backlog. Sorry. What we should keep in mind when we are planning for moving in for automation. One is there is a significant amount of financial investment, or we need to have a fixed rental agreement with a company for having instruments and consumables. For that, we have to find out whether we have sufficient number of samples or tests to do to use that amount of to go in for automation. The next is whether we have enough of floor space. Most of the systems, when we are using it, whether it be a floor model or a benchtop model, we need a considerable amount of area in our existing space. Thirdly, we need highly technical personnel, and these persons need trainings and retrainings to keep in touch with the instruments they are using. And then we need, if we don't have enough space in our current lab, we need to remodel our infrastructure so that we can have these equipments in our setup. Lastly, we need to have software upgrades, or when we go in for automation, we need interfacing. Only then the automation part is completed, or we get all the benefits of automation. Now, what are the key goals when we are implementing automation? In laboratory, it improves specimen and operator workflow. It reduces the risk and random error potential. It reduces variation and total time for test results. There is increasing employee productivity and satisfaction. Definitely, after moving in from manual laboratory or a blood bank, when we moved in for an automated system, I have found that there's a lot of satisfaction in the staff who are working in the different sections. In the blood bank, our key goals was reducing waste and potential for errors, optimizing blood product utilization, addressing an aging and shrinking blood bank workforce, improving efficiency, meeting ever increasing regulatory requirements. What do you need to consider when you're going in for automation? With a number of available options in the market today, choosing whether to implement automation isn't simply a yes or a no proposition. More accurately, the question is, when do we have to automate? Where should we automate, or which lab we should automate? How much of the blood bank should we automate? So now we have, so this is the time to think, do you need to automate everything? or partially automate some things while evaluating the workload, or you may evaluate if manual and automated methods may work well together. Now, consider what to automate. For starters, the conventional pre-transfusion technique testing techniques in immunohematology are quite cumbersome. Like say the tube technique, considered a gold standard, has some inherent issues like elution of low affinity antibodies during washing, then variability in red cell concentrations, improper serum ratios, cell serum ratios, lack of consistency in the results due to inter-observer variability. It depends a lot on the people who are doing the test. Like it's a very subjective test when we are doing it manually. Unless we have very well-trained staff, it is very difficult to continue manual methods. So automation can overcome many of such shortcomings. Then automation improves overall quality by decreasing human errors in sample identification, which are the main cause of near-miss events, transfusion reactions, etc., and reducing human errors while testing and subjective variations during interpretation of results, preventing transcription errors during the documentation of results, improving objectivity, reproducibility, and storage and retrieval of results, allowing better manpower utilization and efficiency, and high throughput devices help in better turnaround times. Now, when we are considering to select an instrument for automation, we will look whether we have to have the best. So it's not good, it's not better, it should be the best. And it should be ideal for our setup or for our patient workload and our laboratory, whatever test we are going to do on that. So considering all that, we should select the platform and the test methods. So we should have proper physical space and electrical requirements, and we should decide what tests have to be automated. And most importantly, stat processing capability should be there for that equipment. Backup testing methods and cost also should be counted. Backup is important. If you have only one instrument and you don't have a backup, definitely once there is a downtime, there can be downtime for that particular instrument, and without a backup, either at least a manual or a semi-automated instrument should be there for a backup. Then routine turnaround times, quality control requirements, cost of operation, ease of operation, LIS interface capability and cost, training requirements and cost, vendor assistance in validation, training, maintenance and service agreement. Even if you have the best of equipments, without proper service agreement and without proper service from their part, then that equipment is a failure for you. So the meantime between failures, should be very short or as short as possible. And you should do a instrument downtime assessment to find out how long there's a downtime for the equipment you are using. Then fully automated or semi-automated, first you have to consider your workload, your resources, both financial and personal, competency of staff and space availability. With that, you have to arrive on which platform you're going to choose. You can either choose a semi-automated system. The semi-automated system can give benefits in reducing the number of steps involved in testing, improve reproducibility, and it may give better turnaround time. But again, a semi-automated system still has the scope of human errors related to the manual steps that you are using. Like you have to manually pipette, and all those things can involve in manual errors. And so also in the interpretation of the result. Now, most of the companies, they have the major players in the instruments used in transfusion medicine. They have the automated and the semi-automated system, like the Biorad Switzerland. They have the IH1000 or the Techno Twin Station, the Saxo ID reader, the Digast
Madam?
France. Yeah.
Madam, 5 minutes to go.
Okay. Digast France has Qualis 3 Evo Freeless Minilab. Ortho Clinical Diagnostics has Autoview Innova, BioView, and OrthoVision. Immucor USA has Galileo and Neo. Grifols has Guardiana, which is a semi-automated instruments. The technologies that are used are column agglutination techniques, which has a plastic card with 6 to 8 inbuilt microtubes. The upper part contains the reaction chamber, and the lower part contains either a clear gel or glass beads. And anti-human globulin or other antiseras are incorporated, and the cells are diluted in Liss suspension, and the RBC suspension is mixed with the plasma. The cards are incubated and if required, and then centrifuged. The results may be preserved for up to 24 hours in the testing card or for longer periods in electronic format. The gel card has a sensitivity of 93.5 to 100% when versus the conventional tube technique, which has 50%. Gel technology is more sensitive than the conventional tube technology for cross-matching also. The advantages of CAT: improved sensitivity and specificity, easy to use, simple to read, no wash face, minimal training required, reliable, reproducible, easy storage and long shelf life of reagents, easy disposable of biodegradable cards, widest range of reagents and instrumentation. The disadvantages: need to purchase special incubators and centrifuges to accommodate the microtubes and card, need for specific dispensing pipettes, trained workforce, and cost benefits versus the sample load. The users are for ABO forward and reverse grouping, Rh typing, DAT, antibody screen, antibody identification, compatibility testing, specialized testing, the particle gel immunoassay, which is used for platelet factor 4, heparin antibody assay, PNH, syphilis, etc. Then the solid red cell adherence assay, or the SPRCA, where one of the component of the antigen antibody reaction is immobilized onto the solid medium. And after reaction with the free antigen antibody, the endpoint of the reaction is indicated by use of red cells, which may be part of the antigen antibody reaction or may be added as indicator cells. And this is done in U-shaped microplate wells coated with different antisera, and a drop of 0.5 bromelain treated red cells are added. On centrifugation, antigen positive red cells spread out, while the antigen negative red cells form a button at the bottom. In case of reverse, a monolayer of RBC membrane is attached to the bottom, and plasma to be tested is added. The excess of plasma is blotted, and anti-IgG bound indicator red cells are added to give a visible reaction. So this is the reaction that is seen. This is the positive reaction, and this is the negative reaction. The advantages: standardization is a major advantage, provide stable, well-defined endpoints of the reaction, ease of use, no pre-dilution of reagent is required. It is possible to test hemolyzed lipemic or icteric samples. Enhanced sensitivity makes detection of weak alloantibodies easier. Disadvantages: need for centrifuge, which can spin the microplates, and an incubator for microplate, light source for reading the final results. Increased sensitivity may also detect weak autoantibodies, creating further delays in reporting. And SPRCA has been found to be superior to conventional tube and comparable with that of the column agglutination. The next technique is the electromagnetic technology based on magnetization of RBCs. The paramagnetic particles are absorbed onto the surface of RBC. Once the antibodies in the plasma antisera react with antigens on the RBC in a microplate well, a magnetic force is applied to the bottom of the plate using magnetic plane. This causes the RBC to be pulled down towards the bottom of the microplate. In this manner, the magnetic force replaces the centrifugation step. On shaking or resuspension, the reaction may be deciphered. In forward grouping, the test RBCs are suspended in a solution of iron chloride and bromelain. And in case of reverse grouping, pre-magnetized RBCs are mixed with test plasma in microplate wells. This technology may also be adopted for antibody screening and identification. Here you see the positive comes as a button, whereas the negative is spread out. Major players, Bio-Rad, Umicore, Digast are the major players in automation. And while gel seems to be more sensitive to RH and warm autoantibodies, solid phase and microtiter plate seems to be more sensitive to cold reactive antibodies. Both microtiter plate and gel form column platforms have been reported to miss a clinically significant antibody, supporting the fact that no one technique will identify all antibodies. So automation is, after all, artificial intelligence. Choosing the platform for automation is a major decision, and as described in the previous sections, involves considering a lot of variables in the process. Emerging technologies add to quality, but none of the methods has been found to be unequivocally superior to others. One should aim to balance out the objectives with an aim to harness technology and automation and to detect clinically significant antibodies, rather than allowing for the technology to create undue delays by flagging even insignificant antibodies. This is where human intelligence in the form of SOPs, diagnostic algorithms, etc., need work in tandem with automated system having artificial intelligence to ensure that there are no unwarranted wild goose workups which might delay the supply of blood to our patients. And this is the future where this is already there in US. That's what I heard. You have the blood track emerge or the blood track on demand, where you just put the details of the patient, and like a vending machine, you will get all the blood products that are required for that patient. These are my references. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the wonderful lecture. So here up all the participants. You're getting the bolt of quiz and you will miss if you blink. Over to you, quiz master. I invite our quiz master, Dr. Ikaj.
So I really hope that you were listening closely to the interesting conversation, interesting talk that we had, because the question is based on that talk only. And the question is on your screens now.
Ikaj, we can't see the question here.
Not visible.
Ikaj, this is madam's screen that is coming.
Just a second, ma'am. Just
Yeah.
Here it goes.
which of the following should not be a consideration while selecting for automated instrument? Cost of operation, mean times between failure, color of the instrument, backup testing methods and cost. 8 more seconds. Over to you, ma'am, Dr. Nidhi Mehta.
Thank you, Ikaj. This brings us the answer. So going to the next speaker, I invite our dynamic young speaker, Dr. Ravi Dara, for his case presentation. Ravi is consultant, Department of Transfusion Medicine at Manipal Hospital, Jaipur, and I'm sure everyone knows him. Over to you, Ravi.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for the introduction. Just I am sharing my screen. The 10 minutes are allotted to my case presentation. I will try to finish by 8 minutes or 9 minutes, please. Okay, I will start. I will not waste any time. We are running late already. Oh,
Thank you, Ravi.
it was a patient. Yeah, ma'am. It's a patient profile. It's a 28-year-old female patient. It's a pregnant female patient, you see. The obstetric history was G4P1A2. The A1, the abortion, it was an induced abortion. Entity was given. Okay, there was a known history of entity here. The P1 is a normal delivery. It is a female baby with a 3.5 years age of the age group. O positive was a blood group. Entity was given here also. In the A2, the second abortion, induced abortion again, but there was a doubtful history whether entity was given or not. We don't know. Mother, blood group was O negative. ICT was positive outside report. This was the report we are having. Husband, O group, O positive. Now coming to clinical profile, at 16 weeks of pregnancy, she was registered with an outside hospital. It was not a my hospital case. It was referred afterward to me. It was outside hospital. They were registered there for a follow-up of MCA PSV velocity and fetal anemia monitoring. At that time, it was ICT was positive, which was the titer was 16. At 25th week, 5 days, she has raised MCA PSV in the range of mild anemia. The fetus was in mild anemic, but no signs of hydrops was there in fetus. Repeat titer was done, 64, again outside report. The patient was kept on every 3-day follow-up and admitted after 2 weeks of 25th. At 27 weeks, she got admitted for intrauterine blood transfusion now. At why? It was a rapid rise in MCA PSA velocity, and there was still there, but there were no signs of hydrops was there. Prophylactically, IUT was planned, and mother blood sample was sent for cross match and IUT bag with a demand of 100 ml irradiated leukodepleted PRBC with a hematocrit of 75%. This patient was referred to my hospital for need for antibody identification and blood for IUT. We started our workup. We started with the blood group first, done by column tube technology and CAT technique. You can see the blood group. We come to an inference like forward was O negative clear cut, while the reverse, it was O with, you can see a 4+ reaction in O cells. You can see the reaction also. I kept the picture also here. Here the 4+ reaction in O cells. Now what we are having? We are having unexpected positive reaction in reverse grouping. As a rule, we should go for autocontrol and antibody screening, which should be the next step. We are done. Autocontrol is negative. Antibody screen was PAN positive. It was done by 3-cell panel. You can see autocontrol is negative, but antibody screen is PAN positive, 444. Now, see, when we are having a group O with O cell positive, everybody will think of in India, oh, we are dealing with Bombay, maybe. So first of all, we'll go for H-lectin. Oh, like it is positive here. There's no Bombay. We are not dealing with Bombay here. Autocontrol is negative. Lectin is positive. In Bombay, the H-lectin should come negative. We are not dealing with Bombay. Now, what is this? We proceed further. We got for a DAT. It is negative. We have checked for the weekday of the patient, though it was not relevant, but I had done that. It is negative. We go for antibody identification. The same picture of the screen. All are PAN positive. You can see the picture also here, the pattern. It's all are 444+, all cells, autocontrol clear cut negative. Of course, we are dealing with some type of antibody with high frequency antigen. Now, what to do next? We don't have any option. We cross match with 36 O negative bags. Oh my God, you can see O negative 36 bags. I have searched whole of the Jaipur, contacted many blood banks, get the segment of the O negative from these blood banks to try to find out to give the baby a IUT bag. But frankly speaking, all were 4+ incompatible. Some of the picture I am sharing to you. Even you can see the next picture here. You see the hemolysis or positive. It's a Bombay. I having the cryopreserved Bombay blood group also with me. I have cross matched with that also. Of course, the Bombay is a universal donor. It was incompatible with that also. What I proceeded next, it was an enzyme treatment. The enzyme, it was resistant to enzyme. The antibody which we are dealing here is resistant to enzyme. The papain I was used, the same 4+ reaction. You can see here the enzyme treatment is there. I'm showing you the picture also for enzyme treatment. Then what have I done next? I gone for a patient phenotyping. You can see the patient was typed as D negative, capital C negative. What's the positive is there? Duffy A positive is there. Kid A, Kid B positive there. One important finding you are getting here now. The patient is negative for capital S and small s. Frank, it's very, very, very rare finding. Now what this significance? See, you can see this is a picture. These are the picture phenotyping. You can see the S here, the patient phenotyping. One thing to remember here. See, the patient is N positive. I will explain you why I am showing you this N positive in the last slide of my this presentation. Why I am telling you this patient is N positive, while negative for capital S and small s also. See, in the view of S negative and S small s negative phenotype of the patient, anti-U antibody, allo antibody was suspected in this patient, as most U negative red cells are also S negative and small s negative. See, U antigen is a high prevalence antigen and is found on the RBCs of all individuals except 1% of African Americans. Not India, we don't know even. See, this is a chart of the blood percentage of compatibility. You can see here the most U negative cells are smallest negative, and the compatibility nations we even don't know. In blacks, it's 1% only. In Caucasian, it's 0.1%. It's very difficult to find this blood. And unfortunately, we were unable to get any compatible bags for this patient. And we failed, actually. But what happens to patient then? See, this is a profile for the next day. On the next day even, the USG shows the MCA PSV are very high, fetal movements were decreased, mild ascites was developed in the patient, there was sudden crisis, severe immune hydrops was there in the fetus. And in view of incompatibility of any donor units, we planned for the autologous transfusion of maternal blood. But however, again, the hemoglobin of patient mother only was 8 only, which was not possible for us. But we tried our best. But unfortunately, the fetus became intrauterine dead in the night on the same day. We lost the fetus. No problem. We move further. We continued our workup. She went an induction of labor in the view of IUD. She was delivered without any complication. The patient was not having any complication, but we had lost the fetus. The fetal blood and cord blood was collected from the conception product for the immunohematology workup. What we found the baby blood group was O positive, mother was O negative. Dad was clear-cut positive, antibody screen was positive. On identification, what I suspected, I'm not confirmed, I was suspecting anti-D and anti-U was suspected, but not confirmed. You can see here the workup. This was a baby O positive. We are having very less amount of the cells. That's why you can see the amount of the cells are very low here. This is a mother O negative. This is a baby DCT is there. And you can see the S typing for the mother is clear-cut negative, but here it is baby is positive for S and S. You can see the antibody identification picture. It varies with mother. In mother, it was clear-cut 4+ in all, but in this, you can see a picture of anti-D 1, 2, 3, 4, and 11. Plus, there is some other antibody, which I am suspecting anti-U. Auto control was negative. Clear? Yeah, here it is. The suspecting anti-U and anti-D. What I have done, I have sent the samples were sent to International Red Cell Reference Lab for further IH workup and confirmation of my findings. What I got after a 10 days to 12 days workup, I got the result like we have confirmed the presence of anti-U in patient plasma reacting moderate strength by LIS IAT and with marginally stronger papain treated cells. We also confirmed the presence of anti-D and also confirmed we found the presence of anti-C. See, the patient is having 3 antibodies, anti-D, anti-C, capital C, and anti-U. We also tried to find out the international registries for finding compatible blood for this patient with this phenotype. You can see a O negative, capital C negative, small s negative, capital S negative, U negative. What I got, only 18 donors. 11 in American Rare Donor Program, 3 in NHS, 1 in South Africa, 1 in Canada, 1 in Japan, 1 in Spanish France. Nothing else. Now, I just want to cover up. The U antigen is located on glycoprotein B, very close to RBC membrane between amino acid 33 and 39. It's a high prevalence antigen found in RBCs of all individuals except 1% of American Africans. The RBC is usually typed as S negative, and U negative. And these individuals can make anti-U in response to transfusion or pregnancy. Any hit or transfusion or pregnancy, they will make anti-U antibody. This is typically IgG antibody and reported to cause fatal HTRs and HDFN, as this U antigen is present from birth. This U antigen is also resistant to any enzyme treatment. You have seen in my case here. Here it is. Some examples of this anti-U react with apparent U negative RBCs. though they react very weakly, but even negative RBCs, they react by adsorption elution. These RBCs are called to be as U variant. But last line, I'm showing you last line here. It's like the patient is U negative and N negative. Like our patient was N positive, but if it is negative for both, the antibody may be potent anti-N plus anti-U, making the search more difficult. That's why I told you N is most important in that. Many times it also happened like the patient is also N negative. And at that time, you also have anti-U along with anti-N. It's very, very difficult to find again the blood for that patient. Now, what's our future plan of action for this patient is, before pregnancy, we are trying to improve the mother's hemoglobin by hematinics. For the next pregnancy, we will plan like we will do the titrations, we will do the plasmapheresis and IVIG from the second trimester onwards aggressively to postpone the fetal sensitization and obviate the need for IUT. But if happens, we want the donor. That's why we are searching for that. We try to procure the blood bank from international registries, and if not, we will make possible to do a autologous transfusion here. Thank you. I will acknowledge my work for my Dr. Nicole Thampton, is IBGRL from National UK, NHS Blood and Transplant UK, who helped us a lot for confirmation of this finding. Atom IH working group, Dr. Rekha and Dr. Jaiswal, where the patient was admitted here. They were handling this patient. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ravi, for this wonderful case presentation. The next question, Dr. Ekaj. All participants to gear up.
What a wonderful presentation. I hope you were paying attention, because the next question again comes from the same presentation. Which of the following best describes U antigen and antibodies? The U antigen is sensitive to enzyme treatment. You can read the options yourself. 15 more seconds. 8 seconds. Over to you, Dr. Nidhi.
Thanks, Ekaj. So, over to the next case, Dr. Dolly Gohal, Senior Resident, Department of ICU, Shri Balaji Action, Medical Institute, New Delhi. Over to you, Dolly.
Thank you for the kind introduction, ma'am. Good evening to all. Today we will be discussing 2 case reports of anti-C. Willis antibody with review of literature. We will start with brief introduction about anti-C. Willis antibody. It was first described in 1946 in a patient with lupus, and it's named for its association with capital C antigen and in recognition of the donor Willis. Usually it is naturally occurring, although it may be immune stimulated. Almost always, C. Willis is an IgG antibody with rare case reports of IgM, and it often occurs in association with other antibodies. So our first case is of a 30-year-old male patient, known case of acute myeloid leukemia. He was admitted for further management and chemotherapy and had received induction chemotherapy a year back. He was managed with blood products and other supportive care then. The samples were received in our department for pre-transfusion testing in order to ensure RDP transfusion for the patient. The workup, as you can see, the patient was O positive and RH-KEL phenotype was big C, small e, and KEL negative. On performing antibody screening as a part of routine pre-transfusion testing by solid phase method, it was found to be positive. So next we did that, which also came positive. Since the screening was positive, the samples were further tested for antibody identification using column agglutination method with 14-cell panel. This is the antigram for 3-cell panel. Here there was +2 reaction in cell 1 and in other it was negative. So most probably the possible antibody would be anti-big C or anti-C. Willis. This is the 14-cell antigram, and Looking at the pattern, there is +1 reaction in cell 2 and rest all are negative. Thus, the reaction pattern of antibody screening and identification panel suggested presence of anti-C. Willis alloantibodies in the provided sample. The next case report is of a 20-year-old male, first-time voluntary blood donor with no transfusion history known. On routine serological testing, the sample tested, the blood group was B positive with Rh and Cal phenotype, big C, small e, and Cal positive. The screening of the sample was positive while the DET was negative. On performing antibody identification using 14 cell panel, we found that the antibody screening and identification panel is suggestive of anti-C. Willis alloantibodies in the provided sample. So moving forward, what is C. Willis antigen? It is a low incidence antigen which results from single amino acid change, glutamine to arginine, which is predicted to be located on first extracellular loop of Rhce gene. Its antithetical antigens include CX and high incidence MAR antigen. Due to the location of C. Willis on the Rhce gene, it almost always coincides with the big C antigen. When associated with C. Willis, the C antigen shows weakened expression and hence an alloanti-big C may rarely be made in a C positive, C. Willis positive individuals. This is the analysis of data from our department from last 30 months. As you can see, around a total of 18,053 donor samples were tested for antibody screening, of which on 11 samples, we had performed antibody identification. Of this 11, 5 samples were having weak warm autoantibodies and 6 were having alloantibodies. Out of the 6 alloantibodies, majority belong to the Rh group. Similarly, in the same duration, 12,401 patient samples were tested for antibody screening, of which on 41 samples, antibody identification was performed. Of this 41, 22 were found alloantibody positive and 19 were having weak form autoantibodies. Thus, after screening around 30,454 samples, only 2 cases of anti-C. Willis antibody were found, making its incidence to be around 0.006%. So what's the role of anti-C. Willis in pre-transfusion testing? The antigenic frequency of C. Willis is more found in Latvian population, 9%, followed by Finns and Caucasians. Although there is no no particular report stating antigenic frequency of C. Willis in Indian population, Jan A. et al. Reported its frequency to be 1.25% in North Indian population. Unlike many other Rh antigens, in the context of transfusion, anti-C. Willis antibody is not typically clinically significant, but maternal C. Willis alloimmunization is also not uncommon. Its reported frequency is of 0.1%. Few case reports are there of mild to severe hemolytic disease of newborn caused by anti-C. Willis were found, including 1 case of hydrops fetalis. Anti-C. Willis antibody has the potential to cause mild to severe, immediate or delayed hemolytic transfusion reaction. There are case reports in the literature which describes anti-C. Willis of IgG type. However, Saini and et al. Reported a rare case of clinically significant IgM anti-C. Willis in an obstetric patient from central India. The identification of anti-C. Willis requires the reagent RBC panels, which include C. Willis antigen positive RBCs. However, due to low frequency of C. Willis positive individual in population, some set of screening cells may not include those cells, due to which cases with anti-C. Willis may be missed. In obstetric patient population, C. Willis antigen positive antibody screening cells should be used for antibody screening, as this may not be as infrequent as they are thought to be and can result in clinically significant HDN. If these antibodies are identified, titer in maternal serum and assessment of fetal well-being should be done aggressively. When anti-C-Villus is detected in patient sample, there is usually no requirement for selection of antigen negative donor blood cells because almost 98% of donor units are C-Villus negative. For patients with anti-C-Villus antibody, the red cell blood units that are cross-match compatible at 37 IAT phase should be selected for transfusion. Thus, to conclude, antibody screening and identification is recommended in pre-transfusion testing, especially in multi-transfused patients and patients belonging to reproductive age group, so that antibody to low frequency antigen can be detected and its potential to cause hemolytic transfusion reaction and HDN can be assessed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Dolly. So over to the quiz master, Dr. Ekaj, over to you. I hope everybody was attentive.
So I must remind again the rules that were given in the beginning, that question number 3 to 5, which we are going to see now, they are timed questions. So we are noting down two things. One, you must have the right answer. Also, you must give the quickest answer. There will be 3 questions. The questions are on your screen now. We will give you 1 minute and 30 seconds. "35 seconds over. "30 seconds left. And that's time. Over to you, Dr. Nidhi.
Thank you, Ekaj. So this takes us to the panel discussion. Dr. Ankit, over to you.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Nidhi ma'am.
You can share your slides.
Yeah. So after one interesting talk and 2 interesting cases, we will have some panel discussion, some questions. I hope I'm audible and the slides are visible.
Yes.
Okay. So this panel discussion is for some few clinical case scenario which we encounter once in a while in our labs, maybe sometime very often and sometime not very often. So for this panel discussion, we have 3 panelists today. Dr. Poonam Srivastava. Madam is Chief Advisor of Lions Blood Bank, Delhi. We have Dr. Rajesh Sawant, who is Consultant Transfusion Medicine at Kokilabin Dhirubhai Ambani Hospital, Mumbai. And we have Dr. Divjot Singh Lamba, who is Associate Professor at PGI Chandigarh. So these are the clinical case scenario, and our experts will give their advice what to do in this special clinical case situation. So first clinical situation is we have a patient who we have done many cross matches. All the cross matches are coming incompatible. While performing antibody screen and identification, all the cells are positive. But when we perform auto cross match and DAT, it's coming negative. So this question is to Dr. Poonam Srivastava, madam. Ma'am, please unmute yourself and give
Yes,
your
I'm already
advice on the same.
unmuted.
Yeah.
So the first question is, how do you see these cases? I've read your question also. Yes, we see these cases occasionally, but I have noticed lately in last few months, we have been knowing it quite frequently, better than before. I think because a lot of people have started doing antibody screening and identification, and that is why reporting is increasing for such cases. So, Ankit, so should I answer the second question
Yes,
also?
yes, please go ahead. Please go ahead, ma'am.
So what could be the probable reason? So whenever we find such type of cases, that there are two possibilities, either multiple alloantibodies or antibodies to a high prevalence antigen. And we can, how to approach these cases? So the very important thing is to have a very good clinical history, especially history of prior transfusion, pregnancy, and then observe reaction pattern, whether they are equal in all the screening cells or panel cells or variable, whether the reactions are same in different phases, immediate screening, 37 or 80, they will give us an idea. Because if the reaction patterns are, I think somebody is unmuted.
Mr. Chandra Joshi, please mute yourself. Please mute yourself. There's a sound from your end.
So, if the reaction patterns are equivocal, the case may be of a high frequency antigen. If variable, we should think of in favor of multiple alloantibodies. So further testing which can be useful in such guiding investigations, because all of us are not having access to all those rare panels, rare sera, rare cells. So what can we do in our scenario? I think even in existing scenario, we can do a lot if we can understand the problem and we have an intention to solve it. So the most important thing is abiotyping. If it is O group, we can think of a Bombay type, which is the most common in India. Sometimes these antibodies may give a problem in reverse grouping. So we should keep in mind also. And the first thing, after that, we can do an extended phenotype of patients' RBCs for RH, H, especially in our scenario because of Bombay type, MNS, Kell, Duffy, Kate, Lewis. Lewis especially I've added, and P also, P1 also. This will help to identify which antibodies patient can produce. And also we can detect rare phenotypes like R2R2, RH deletion, D dash dash, S minus, like Ravi has just presented a case, and because of phenotype, we could just guess that it could be NTU because it was S minus, S minus. Similarly, the other guesses also can be done based on these phenotypes. So in our situation, we can have this as a basic investigation. If patient is K positive, Kell positive, then we should test for little k or Celano. Why? Because if it is K negative, then that little k you can always rule out because that will be positive because it is antithetical. Then another thing is that we must check the ethnicity of the patient. Like we know that NTU is more common in African cases, Bombay in Indian, similarly Indian INB, more in Indian patients or Southeast Asia cases. So that also plays a very important role, but not exactly because now NTU is reported from Jaipur and the patient may belong to some interior. So we must think that we have to remain open. Then after that, what to do? So we can select a reagent red cell sample that matches the patient's phenotype. And if reactive, because all the cells are reactive in this case, 4+, then we consider antibody to hypervalence antigen. Then we should do adsorption using this phenotype matched red cells and test the adsorbed serum for screening with the screening panel to rule out any underlying alloantibodies. If screening is negative, that means there are no underlying alloantibodies. Then we can do elution of the adsorbed cells, because whatever antibody is there will cause the adsorbing cells to be DAT positive. And when we do the elution, the antibody will come in the eluate, and we can test that can act as in fact as an anti-serum for that antibody. We should test the patient cells and they should come negative, and other siblings or other where we are suspecting, we can test those cells with this serum. Then test the most important test, which I recommend, is test patient serum with enzymes and DTT treated RBCs. This is, the best thing which can be there for differentiating in our scenario, because all of us can do an enzyme and DTT panel, and then of course molecular testing. Next slide. Thank you. Yeah, so this is what I was mentioning, that if we have papain, enzyme and DTT treated cells, and we can compare the reactions, we can at least zero in which possible specificities can be there. And through this only, I have detected 2 cases of anti-INB antibodies, because if both in papain and DTT, the cells become negative, there are only 2 possibilities, INB and GMH. And with the reaction pattern, you can differentiate between the 2. And similarly, other antibodies can also be differentiated. This is a very good, my favorite table, and I think everybody should have this in their labs. The first case which I solved after 22 days of regular, working on that sample, I got this table from JETS, and then I could solve that. Next slide. So, but confirming the antibody, we need to show that the patient red cells is negative for the antigen. We will not have anti-serum. We need to have negative red cells for that antigen to show that they are negative, but we might not have that. So confirming will be very difficult. Next. So where we can refer the sample, we can refer to 2 different labs. There are 2-3 different labs working in our country as well. Then ICMR or IBGRL. Like Ravi has sent the sample, and then we can know the reports. Next. So serologically difficult antibodies, but they have least clinical significance, are antibodies to NOPS antigen, Rogers, CHIDOS, anti-JMH. How can you differentiate between them? And the one which are clinically significant is that these antibodies react at high serum dilutions, but observed reactions are less than 2+ with undiluted serum. And the antibodies are demonstrate variable reactivity with the identification panel, whereas the other antibodies have a definitive pattern, and they are poorly reactive with cord RBCs. They are considered sometimes as the nuance antibodies because they often take considerable time to identify, but rarely cause significant RBC destruction. Next. So management is, you can discuss with the clinician, test siblings, plan to build up hemoglobin of the patient, conserve blood loss during surgery, contact other blood centers, autologous donation, and of course, rare donor registry. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your inputs about this case. So my next case scenario is I address to Dr. Devjot Singh Lama. And this case scenario is like this. Nowadays, we do a lot of ABO incompatible. Nowadays, we do a lot of ABO incompatible renal transplant. And whenever we do ABO renal transplant, the blood banks have to do ABO titers. And sometimes we see nephrology department send a sample for ABO titer to either to 2 blood banks or 2 different labs, sometimes to blood bank as well as to labs. and we observe the differences in the titer value. So my question to Dr. Divjot Singh Laba is, what might be the reason of this variations, and what explanation we should give to the nephrology department, and what are your suggestions so that we can minimize these variations? So over to you, Dr. Lamba, please. Please unmute yourself, Divjot.
Yeah, first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and I thanks the Atom working group to include me in this panel discussion. So basically, whenever the antibody titrations are done, so it could be by different technologies, and the variation can come by various factors. One of the important factor is which technology you are using, either using gel or you are using conventional tube technique. And another important fact is various factors which I'll discuss. These include it also one important other factor is how you are interpreting the result, whether you are interpreting it as weak plus or 1+. So there are various studies which show that the result when interpreted on gel by 1+ as the titer, so it leads to less intervariability between the labs. And what are the various variations which have been kindly come to the previous slide. So there are various variations which can result in different interpretation of the results. So this is technology as I've discussed. Then the endpoint, the result you are measuring, and source of red cells you are using, whether you have performed a QC before doing the test, whether the titration method is indirect agglutination test or a room temperature test. So measurement of IgG and IgM, whether you're doing like in direct room temperature, you will be detecting IgM plus some part of IgG as well. In the indirect agglutination test, you will be detecting IgM plus IgG plus some part of IgM, as well as if you're using a IAT DTT treated, you will be detecting the IgG titers. So it would depend on which type of technology you are using, what is the endpoint, and it would also depend on what type of tests you are using in that particular technology. Like for column agglutination test, you can do it on plain card as well as for the Lisp-Pum card, and DTT treated Lisp-Pum card will give you the IgG titers. So it leads to the variation, and variables within the technology can also be there depending on red cell dilution you are using for that particular technology, whether the same person is performing that test every time or there are different persons, whether the same person is giving the reading for that particular test. So all this would lead to the variations. And plasma and red cell ratio. So there is a study, can we come to the next slide? So there is a study of conventional tube technique with the CAT, column agglutination technology. So this study demonstrated that ABO antibody titers measured by the auto column agglutination technology and the conventional tube technique had a slightly significant, highly significant correlation, and good agreement indicated reliable results. So thus the auto column agglutination test can be implemented to perform the antibody titration in the routine laboratory. So this is the auto column agglutination test, and even the correlation is also with the column agglutination test with the conventional tube technique. Kindly come to the next slide. So what are the various advantages of the column agglutination test? So it is more qualitative in grading the strength of agglutination reaction. The inter-observer variation is minimal, less time consuming, uses smaller volumes of serum and RBCs. The IgG gel method offers the best turnaround time, requiring only 15 minutes of incubation at 37 degrees as compared to the 45 minutes for the conventional tube technique. And the gel card technique at the AHG phase, if 1.1+ endpoint is used, shows reduced variance compared to the tube-based techniques as well. And the tube-based uniform procedure used, so there was a review article in 2008 which shows that if the tube technique is being used and the reading is being done at week plus endpoint, so the intervariability between the laboratories is very less. So it depends on various factors why the interpretation is going to change person to person or lab to lab, or depending on the technology you are using. So column agglutination test simply decrease the variation as compared to the tube tap. But one disadvantage is it is costly. Kindly come to the next slide. So there is also a study which shows that column agglutination test without DTT and with DTT. So median titers for NT-B and NT-A in all the blood groups were higher in the column agglutination without DTT than with DTT, especially for group O individuals. So there are certain guidelines that have been framed which shows that both should be used for titration of the ABO incompatible transplant recipients. Kindly come to the next slide. So what measures should be used on how the national standards can be made? So there is one important need for EQUAS, external quality insurance by outside lab, which leads to a standard titration results which can be obtained and can be interpreted and compared with different labs. So need for reference preparations for NT-A and NT-B, need standardization to allow equitable access to the ABO incompatible transplant programs, so that all various parts of the country are benefited from this standardization, and need to find a same way to implement how we will implement this standardization because of the vast diversity in our nation. So antibody titer among different techniques. There was a study by Makru et al. Which shows that consistent and uniform application of the method for titration throughout the treatment of the patient is highly essential. So a single titer should be technique should be used for complete titration throughout the treatment, pre and post transplant as well. And reading of all the titers by the same physician keeps the data undisputed. So kindly come to the next screen. So this is a working subgroup of the Indian physicians who have recommended various ABO incompatible kidney transplant recommendations. So related to the titration, they have recommended that gel or column agglutination test is the method of choice for antibody titration, and tube can be used if it is not available as an alternative, but preferable is gel. Post plasmapheresis titers, previous slide please. Post plasmapheresis titers should be monitored anywhere between 2 and 12 hours, and the antibody titer recommendation for going into the transplant is less than equal to 1:16, whereas various centers are using less than this, also 1:8. So they have recommended 1:16 or below. So similarly, kindly come to the next slide. So they have compared various technologies, that is plasma exchange for antibody removal, double filtration plasmapheresis, and immunoadsorption. And efficiency is more for immunoadsorption, but it is costly and it is restricted, but effectiveness is high. So sessions to reach the target are few. So it does not remove albumin, whereas the other technologies, plasma exchange or DFPP, so effectiveness is low to moderate, and sessions are high or less than the plasma exchange, but more than the immunoadsorption. And recommended. Coming to the next slide. So this is just an overview of the antibody reduction therapy. First, the patient is started with rituximab, then the plasma exchange cycles are started. The patient is still outpatient. IVIG can be used, and various immunomodulators and immunosuppressions like tacrolimus and mycophenolate mofetil. So at the day of transplant, the titers preferable, so as per recommendation, is less than 1:16, and here it is mentioned as 1:8. And after that, 2-hour and 12-hour post transplant, again the titers should be done, and subsequently methylpred and thymoglobulin are started, and titers are monitored. So,
Ankit, we have
just this is the
time is over.
Last slide. So there is British Transplantation Society guidelines, which have given recommendations of the strength of recommendation, level 1 or level 2, and according to quality of evidence, A, B, C, and D. So just to the next slide, we have some main recommendations which they have given. If the ABO incompatible transplantation is to be performed, blood group antibody titers must be measured with differentiation between A1 and A2 subgroups of the recipient, and discriminate between IgG and IgM specific for ABO antibodies. So the level of evidence they have given is 1C. And laboratories must measure ABO titers, must be participate in a national quality assurance scheme. They have also recommended this. And the major, so what are the high risks for factors for the titration. So this slide has been distorted. The hemagglutination titer greater than 1:256. If the donor group A1, so it is high risk. Donor living type is less risk as compared to the disease donor, and HLA incompatibility is more risk as compared to the no HLA incompatibility. So thank you all for the patient listening.
Thank you, Devjot, for your views on ABO incompatible renal transplant and the titers. So quickly we move to the next case scenario. This case scenario I addressed to Dr. Rajesh Sawant. Sometimes we see we have a thalassemia, the patients whose cross-match was negative, antibody screening was negative the previous month. But the next month we observe the hemoglobin is not risen up to the mark, it's not satisfactory, and we found antibody screening is suddenly positive. So my question to Dr. Sawant is, have you ever seen this kind of cases? If yes, what are the clinical presentation and how do you manage these kind of cases? So over to you, Dr. Sawant, sir, please.
Thank you, Ankit. And I thank the organizers also for this opportunity. So yes, we see these kind of cases, though the occurrence may be actually more than what we are seeing, because only the hemoglobinopathy cases are the ones which come back to us at a regular interval, and therefore we complication. So this is nothing but delayed hemolytic transfusion reaction, which is destruction of the transfused red cells after a short span of say 3 to 4 days to up to about 15 days after the transfusion. And we need to also understand the entity DSTR, that is the delayed serologic transfusion reaction, which is nothing but a silent DHTR. So there is no active hemolysis, but there is an appearance of an antibody. Next slide, please. Yeah. So when will we suspect this DHTR? As I said, if there is unexplained fever, anemia, usually after about 2 days to 2 weeks after the transfusion, and the patient presents with reticulocytosis, perocytosis, increased LDH, antibody screen which was negative will now be positive, and the DAT may or may not be positive, right? Reported occurrence is about 1 in 2,500, but as I said, it may be much more than what has been reported, because we may be missing all those patients who do not come back to us. Next. So what are the usual causes? So basically, after transfusion or any kind of transplantation, pregnancy, etc., the patient may make an antibody to a red cell antigen that they lack. And if the patient receives or is exposed to that particular antigen as a part of red cell transfusion, which expresses that antigen, then there will be a hemolytic transfusion reaction, which is DHTR. So this may also occur if by chance a unit which has malarial parasites, so as a TTI or babesiosis, is also transfused by chance, by mistake. The clinical severity of this DHTR depends on the immunogenicity or the dose of the antigen. And the most common blood groups that are involved will include, apart from the RH blood group, will include the KID, Duffy, KEL, and the MNS system in the order of decreasing frequency. So this is very important. Next. So as I said, the differential diagnosis, the most common, we have to differentiate this from warm autoimmune hemolytic anemia, because it will also present with exactly almost the similar signs and symptoms. The antibody screen and the panel results will almost show pan-reactivity rather than specificity in this case. So that's the way to differentiate. Vaso-occlusive pain crisis, especially in the sickle cell disease scenario, has to be differentiated from a DHTR. Passenger lymphocyte syndrome, if there's a minor ABO incompatible organ transplant, then it may present similar to DHTR. And as already discussed, malaria or babesia infected RBC component transfusion can also mimic a DHTR. Next. So we request a DAT or antibody screen, look at the LDH and markers of hemolysis like bilirubin and haptoglobin. Next, please. Most of these delayed hemolytic transfusion reactions, they are not very, very severe. So there is mild to moderate hemolysis, or there may not be any hemolysis. So it can be a DSTR as well. and no treatment will be needed. There's no life-threatening hemolysis as such. If you identify an antibody, then you can always go for a antigen negative transfusion in future forever for this patient. Next, please. So coming to treatment, if specific intervention may not be indicated, then you just counsel the patient and look at the specificity of the antibodies. The most immediate treatment will be antipyretics for fever, etc. A good communication with the patient's family as well as the transfusion department and the physician is very, very, very important in this case, because the patient, if he is going to need transfusions at a regular interval, then he needs to get a phenotype negative transfusion. So that's very important. Again, next, please. So the most important I feel here is prevention, and how can we prevent this particular complication of DHTR is one is taking accurate transfusion histories, because patients actually move from one hospital to other for their routine transfusions and you may not know what was the scenario elsewhere. So please dig deep down into the history of the patient, take a proper elaborate history, try to understand, look at the reports from the previous center. You may find there were reports of some hemolysis or detection of some antibodies, etc. And then you plan the transfusion. So the basic requirement is, at least if we can give them the red blood cells that are matched for the C, E, and K at a minimum, that will take care of almost 70% of the alloantibodies, and that will be really a good margin of safety for these patients. Next, please. But transfusion of these phenotypically matched RBCs, there are a lot of practical considerations, including economical considerations like the cost. So cost effectiveness has to be looked into, but definitely at least partial phenotype matching, which includes the RH, the KEL, and I would also include the KID antigens in this case, because there are 7-8 cases which I myself have seen during my career, and out of these, 4 are involving the KID antigen, and they may appear, reappear, disappear, so very deceptive. So we have to manage them well, and we have to give the phenotype negative units always, even if that particular antibody is not detected at that moment. It can reappear if you give a KID antigen positive transfusion. So I think this is the basic background which we all need to know when we are dealing with delayed hemolytic transfusion reaction. So a proper dialogue with the patient and the treating physician and a good follow-up will help us, and definitely at least RH and KEL matched transfusions can be the standard of care for these patients. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind advice and guidance for this kind of cases. Dr. Nidhi, can we take 1 or 2 questions? Do we have time?
I think we have overshot the time, Ankit.
Okay.
It's already 4:34.
So
maybe one question.
Maybe one question. So from audience, anybody want to have one question, quick one? Can raise the hand or unmute yourself and ask the question quickly.
Ankit?
Yes, ma'am.
Just see for the questions in the chat if they are there.
Oh,
well, I just couple of things I have. Basically, I should compliment all the speakers, number one. Number two, well, basically, this is good presentation of the papers, but it is also an educative. Well, couple of the talks, because I want to basically being an educative, because at least Dr. Dara, he's a well-learned immunohematologist now. Well, basically, I think once we are doing the grouping, the auto control is a must, rather later going for it. It should be a part of the cell and serum grouping. Auto control should be run along with it. Number two, in case we have already done away, I have done the screening with the NTH. That means we have ruled out the Bombay group. There was no need to go for the Bombay phenotyping again. And the third thing, as regards the automation, well, as you know, we have 3,500 blood banks across the country, and hardly roughly around 500 blood banks which have a blood collection more than 10,000 or so. So it is in those blood centers where we can think of automation? Well, there are automated centers. Well, everybody, it is not to be crazy to have the automation. Automation is something, well, because basically we have semi-automated type of the systems. Well, we can go ahead rather than going for the flow automated system. As Rajesh Sawant, well, basic important ones, we are using the technologies, like we are using column agglutination, we are using solid phase. One of the biggest advantage for the solid phase is primarily for the kit, because we have missed all these antibodies in the column agglutination technology, and we have resolved them once we were using. So this is a couple of the things, but let me compliment all the speakers. And I have gone through all this because this is very good, that in case we have sort of good, you should always move 15 minutes for the question answer, because there will be always some doubts. Otherwise, these doubts will go unnoticed. One simple question to Dr. Navjot: what is the P for AABB certification course? Because he has not even told last time. I hope this time he will tell.
Sir, tomorrow there is a webinar. We will share you the link and you can attend, sir. And then
I will be always attending. Well, basically, see, I am academic person.
We are running out of time, sir.
Sir, कल इसी पे है quality पे ABB पे. Tomorrow 12 noon.
12 noon is not a very odd time, because you are all busy. We are all busy. We are all busy. Busy for this thing. Basically, let me see. In any case, send me the link.
No,
I will
you're
try
most welcome to attend it. We would love to have you on that.
Thank you.
Webinar.
Please send me the link.
So much,
I will go for it. Thank you.
Over to you, Nidhi ma'am, now.
And one quick question. Can I ask? Sir, one quick. Sir?
I need to take permission from Dr. Nidhi. Dr. Nidhi, we have to go ahead. Please ask your question. I can't see who is asking, but please go ahead, ask the question, but very quickly.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Nandkishore, please go ahead quickly.
Yes, sir. Thank you for accepting the request. Can anyone throw light on the antigens and antibodies which are vital for solid organ transplant? That's the question, sir. Just the type of antigens and antibodies which are vital. That's all.
You mean for solid organ?
Solid organs,
For
yes,
transplant.
sir.
For transplant,
Yes,
we consider only for immunohematology point of view, only
I think
ABO,
blood group,
not
ABO
even.
blood group is vital, so we have
Divjot is
to
answering.
see for the IgM and the IgG of the isoglutinins, depending on the patient and the recipient blood group, it would depend. But
Yeah.
solid organ ABO
So, sir,
matching is vital.
I think
And HLA.
we need to close the session now. So it was a wonderful session. Good participation by all the speakers and panelists. Thank you all. I would request Dr. Mangwana to give vote of thanks. Dr. Mangwana, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Nidhi, for the introduction. And here we are coming to the close of first of the series of the Atom India chapter webinar. So distinguished faculty, senior and friends, a big thanks to all of you for such a grand presence. And we had it almost 153 participants at one time. So it's really great to see you all virtually. And before I proceed for this vote of thanks, one good news for the participant who had participated in that quiz. Dr. Lavanya RS is the winner for today's quiz, who led by just the 6 seconds from Dr. Amit Kumar Biswas. Although 17 participants answered the quiz. So congratulations to Dr. Lavanya RS. Big cheers to all the participants who participated in this space. So coming to this vote of thanks, It's really my pleasure to deliver this vote of thanks to all who have helped make this event such a success. On behalf of Asian Association of Transfusion Medicine, India chapter, I would like to express my deep-felt thanks to Dr. Navjot Chaudhary, the Atom International President, an organizer par excellence, a good taskmaster, and a source of inspiration to all of us and guiding spirit. Thank you so much, Dr. Chaudhary. I would like also to thank Dr. Gajendra Gupta, Atom India chapter chairperson, who helped us advising and taking care even for the smallest issues for organizing this event. I am indeed grateful to all the eminent speakers for their excellent presentations, panelists and the guest faculty to spare their valuable time to be present virtually, share their knowledge to reach out to the maximum possible stakeholders. I'm very thankful to Dr. Ankit for making efforts for the panel discussion and sharing the experience by all the panelists, and Dr. Eket Jindal, the evergreen quiz master, for keeping everyone alert and hooked to the event so that one should not really miss. I'm thankful to the Imicor India for supporting the event. Once again, my sincere thanks to all the participants who have joined this event. Last but not the least, my wholehearted thanks to my team members from the scientific committee who have worked hard in making this event successful and being available even at the short notice. Thank you all. And to conclude, let me once again reiterate that without you, we will never have the courage to dream and the passion to make it happen. So thank you one and all. Looking forward to meet you once again next month, 4th Thursday, that is 26th August. Best of luck to all. Thank you.
Thank you all.
I have a small request. If everyone could just switch on their camera, we'll have a group photograph. Just, I would request everybody, wherever you are, we don't mind, please switch on your cameras. We just want to know who all were there with us in this academic fiesta.
So now only 91 are left. Ekaj?
Out of 153.
I can see, I can see Sangeeta was clearing her ear.
मैं सोच रही थी कुछ कान में तो नहीं, अरे 93 अभी भी ऐसा। जल्दी से खींचो अच्छी सी फोटो।
Honored ma'am, I'm going for the screen 1. Screen 2 is done. Screen 3. I don't see many faces. Please switch on your cameras. These are the back benches. Please switch on the cameras. We've come to you for the photograph. Please switch on your cameras.
Dr. Gajendra Gupta, please switch on the camera.
नहीं तो अपनी फोटो लगा दो. Put up a picture, even if you don't want to switch on your cameras.
Dr. Gajendra, हमारे चेयरपर्सन साहब घूम गए.
वो फोन चालू करके चले गए लग रहा है.
Srivalli, Rasmi Sood, Mitali, Sonali, Ranjita, Dhananjay, Nita, Veena, please. Ripple, Ankit Jain.
सर आज तो बहुत शैम्पू वाले बाल लग रहे हैं.
I think you have pointed it out right. You are a keen observer.
मकड़ों से देखो लग रहा है.
You are right. You are right. I think आज तो पूरा
एकदम ऐसे बाल.